So today is the third day of Russian-Ukrainian war, and there is no information on the losses from the Ministry of Defense in Russia. Basically, the official information is that there is no losses. There is no true information in the Russian language. Therefore, I would like to share how Russia presents the situation in Ukraine right now. The first thing is that the parents of the soldiers serving in Ukraine do not have information on whether they're being captured or they're already dead. There is a huge report from Dost, an opposition channel that shows the father of the first captured soldier in Ukraine, who says that he had no information about what's happening to his son and whether he'll be exchanged. It's important to say that sources like Dost, BBC, and other channels are marked in Russia as agents of foreign influence. So they're not trusted, and what they represent is actually independent from the government. At the same time, there are so-called Frenchies like Esquire, Forbes, Russia, that are absolutely the outlets of propaganda and misinformation, and they use different cues to narrate what's happening in Ukraine in the pro-Kremlin way. As for now, Twitter and Facebook banned Russian media from sponsoring their content, and so I would like to make an overview of the information that you can get if you speak only the Russian language. And I would start with celebrities. One of the celebrities is the chief editor of Eco Moscow, Venediktov. He gave several interviews for his own channel, where he presented the situation as being impossible to figure out, Ukrainians lying about what's happening with Russian invasion in Ukraine. There's also a famous blogger, Varlamov, who also presents this kind of idea that it's impossible to see through the fog of war, and Ukrainian army wants to present a better picture of what's happening. And I basically quote him that he says, if you look it up on the internet, you will practically not see any proof. There are very few videos. They are all kind of single and distinct. It's not true. If you check Deutsche Welle, France 24, BBC News, or Twitter, you'll find a lot of videos that show from different sides what's happening, and you can get the context. But if you want to be blind, you'll be blind. There are also art celebrities like Oxymoron. He's a rapper. He won different competitions, and I quote him: I'm specifically against the war that Russia is now unleashing against the people of Ukraine. I believe that this is a catastrophe and a crime. The history of the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, the bombing of Belgrade can in no way justify what is happening now. No matter how they explain to us that this is not aggression but protection. But Ukraine did not invade the territory of Russia. It is Russia that is now bombing a sovereign state. And by mentioning Afghanistan, Belgrade, and Iraq, he means that Russia constantly uses whataboutism, saying that NATO is an expansive imperialist force, and a lot of Americans and Westerners buy into it. But we don't see NATO here. We see Russia. There is also a really important case of Urgant, who had a night show, a really successful one, getting like 20 million views. It disappeared from the main propagandist channel in Russia because Urgant posted on Facebook that he's against the war and there is no justification for it. And I quote from Russian media Lenta.ru what they lie about what's happening with Urgant. The program Evening Urgant is in the past days was not planned on the channel due to the days off, which was originally announced in the grid. The current relayout is connected with important social and political events. So this is like an ambiguous statement that tries to cover up what's happening. There is also a precedent of people of art trying to oppose the war in Russia. In Moscow Bolshoi Theater, all of them were instructed not to give any comments on social media or for news, because otherwise, I quote, it will be regarded as treason. They got this message from the Minister of Culture. I also want to point out to the position that Russian scholars and professors in humanities took to cover the issue. Usually they try to give a really indistinct response to what's happening, saying that, we need to take care of our emotions, we need to we need to detox our news. I'll give a few examples. For instance, Natalia Dolina, who is a professor of MGIMO, a really famous institution, she says that she's a couch, and I basically quote her. You can take responsibility for your emotional state, and as a couch I will help you to stop the spread of fear and panic. I can help you to take control of hatred and judgment, preventing evil from getting past you. I also can help you to take control of the thoughtlessness of information. So she tries to cover the psychological side of what's happening in Russian media without directly saying that she's against the war. Maybe she's actually for the war, but she thinks that it's really bad to take it too seriously and to feel it with your body. I should say that here we are bombed by Russian missiles, and it's not only about fear, but it's about our health and our safety. And Russians being scared of what is happening is not enough. It's not about them being terrified that they are complicit in war crime. It's about them not doing anything. Even going to a protest is not enough at this moment. It's also crucial to talk about Russian liberals, for instance, Navalny, or blogger Maxim Katz, who is connected to Moscow elections. All of them take the stance of talking about economy, that it will impact the Russian economy if something happens. And it seems like a pseudo-Marxist approach to ethics and to politics. I'm really surprised that it still seems to be opposition to talk about economic losses for a country that invades a neighboring country without any plausible reason. By the way, for these pseudo-Marxists, I want to say that Belarus, 7 banks in Belarus just went on bankruptcy, and Russians cannot withdraw cash. There is no money in the ATMs, so economy is suffering, but it's not what we are feeling here. We are suffering much more. Probably the only frontier that is not giving up to propaganda is politology. The professors in politology claim that this is the end of diplomacy now for Russia, that Russia should expect to be banned from many international organizations. I specifically would like to mention So I would like to specifically thank and mention 2 politologists, Schulman and Pavlovsky, who explained the situations to fellow Russians in simple words, explaining what's happening really, that this is a war crime that has no justification, and that politology will not have any help in this crisis, that it's beyond science. Also, I want to mention Andrei Zubov, who used to be a professor at MGU, and now he is the vice president of the party Parnas. I'd like to quote him. "War is terrible, but the peace that Putin brings to Ukraine and all of humanity is immeasurable, and it's more than terrible. This is the world of totalitarian dictatorship, the world of lawlessness and mass repression, the world of lies and poverty." Probably this is the strongest statement that I've been able to find on the Russian internet. Just a few notes on how the war is presented in Russia. There is no such a thing as a war in Russian media. They call it a special operation, and they twist the language. They speak of denazification from the word Nazi, because Putin claimed that Ukrainians dehumanized from the word communism the Ukrainian sites, and this is kind of a Nazi move in his belief. So he wants to bring communism and Soviet legacy back There's also the way how they use prepositions, and the only channel in Russia that started using the correct preposition when talking about Ukraine, they say in Ukraine, в Україні, while other media still continue to use на Україні, which is an imperialistic way to talk about Ukraine as territory, not as a sovereign country. And they all know about it because they've been instructed to change it for 30 years. I'd also like to mention the narratives that the Kremlin and the Russian media use, because in these narratives they reflect their own view of history, which is very different to what we know in the world history and how it's read outside of Russia. So the first thing is that, of course, they see themselves as World War II liberators, and that they propose denazification of Europe, while at the same time they fell into the paradox. They bombed Kiev on the day of Soviet army, but at the same time they bombed Kiev at 4 a.m. and there is a famous saying by the radio speaker that Kiev was bombed at 4 a.m. by Nazis. So basically Russia is using two narratives and it's opposing each other. From one perspective they're like Soviet, but at the same time they're like Nazis bombing Kiev in the morning. And of course there are some narratives that are prepared before anything happens in Ukraine, and it completely distorts the reality. The example would be what happened with the island Zmiyny. 12 Navy officers refused to be captured and they fought against the Russian intervention, but the Russian news presented something absolutely from the thin air, saying that 88 Navy soldiers joined the Russian army. They wanted to copy the narrative with the Crimea, but as we know, it's absolutely different here on the ground. People show resistance to the Russian army, and it will continue, and I'm absolutely sure that we will win, and we will see how the Russian media just collapses and starts over. And please, when it happens, don't fall for it. Don't take their lies as their excuses. They will tell that they didn't know, they didn't mean that they wanted to say something else than they said. It's not true. They know what they're doing. Their professors know what they're doing. Their journalists know what they're doing. They're killing us with lies. Thank you for your attention. I hope to see you again being alive.